there's still a long way to go because the media, again, the portrayals of women is still problematic. I could have turned the television on, turn the sound down, and just flick through the stations, and I can tell you which ones are the Latin stations, which ones are the American ones, which ones are the European ones, just based on how the women are dressed and how much makeup they have on. My name is Dowoti Desir, Mambo Dowoti Desir. So I'm actually a priestess in Haitian Voodoo, but I'm also a human rights activist. I was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, but my mother was a Cubana. And all the women in my maternal line were born in Cuba and of Cuban, African, Afro, I guess also European descent. But stepmother was from Colombia, and so there's always been the strong presence of Latina women in my life. But I've never quite fully identified with that aspect of my heritage. In the sacred and the spiritual spaces, there is gender equity there. The men are not more important than we. The men don't have higher positions than we. We have an equal position. If anything, if there's any bias, it's always towards women because we're always perceived to be as a more agile, receptor of spiritual energy and a better conductor of that spiritual energy. So that women have always had, in some ways, more power in the spiritual world. However, in the secular world, things take on a different tone, and so this issue of machismo, comes into play. But one of the things that I always found problematic is how Latinas are represented or not represented in the papers, and particularly in the magazines. And I don't see myself. I don't see anybody who looks like me in those magazines. I'm always amused when I see a photo of someone like Cameron Diaz. I've met her. I don't know how much she identifies herself as Latina, but certainly that community has embraced her because of what? Diaz is her last name? I don't know if that, I'd like to think our identities are a little bit more complex than that. It's not just our last names. But because I don't see me, or I'll watch Telemundo, I'll watch some of the other Spanish-speaking stations, I don't see anybody who looks like me. It's not just about gender, but it's the issue of gender and color, gender and race. And a measure of invisibility that especially Afro-Latinas have acquired. That's one more reason why I couldn't fully embrace that aspect of me, because it wasn't allowed to be made visible. Yes, in my own family, perhaps, but in the outside world, it was suppressed. The Organization of American States has a 2011 report on the situation of African descendants. The big issue is in one word, invisibility. Invisibility. So one cannot embrace what is not in your memory. If something isn't told to you, if something isn't presented to you, if it's not made concrete, if it's not made real, or the structures, the political ones, the social ones, the economic ones, the juridical ones, if they're meant to suppress you and not allow you to mobilize, to give you voice, to make you seen, then you cannot advance, one cannot feel safe in that society. Your capacity is demobilized, and you cannot be at ease with the identity that you have, with the identity you may want to embrace. But if you're looking at and seeking to be something that you're not, you will never be a whole person either. The Latina herself was already, the coquette, all of that, with the cuteness and the makeup and the tatas exposed and, all of that, the tight pants, submitting to men, flirtatious. There's been this portrayal of Latinas that, again, was problematic growing up in the light of the civil rights movement, in the light of the feminist movement. This is not a model for womanhood. So these two would be reasons why I would hesitate to embrace that element of my heritage, if you will. I mean, certainly my mother wasn't like that. My grandmother wasn't like that. These were hard-working women. These were women they were beautiful women, but they were strong women. They were women who had pride. My mother would always talk about mettez femme sous haut, meaning like, if you would translate it, it's like put your woman on. Like being a woman was like a coat of armor. Being a woman is something you can go in your room, you pick it up, you put it on. Like a suit, like a coat, like a warrior's thing. Sometimes when you're a kid, anything your mother tells you, it's like, you don't want to hear it. But there's always one thing, at least one thing that you hold on to. And that was that one thing. And that one thing was enough to make me feel sufficiently empowered to understand that no one, not my father, not a husband, no one had the right to keep me down, had the right to stop me from realizing myself, from developing a vision, from making the most of myself in the world, that no one had the right to take advantage and not pay me equally, not recognize the fullness of my humanity. So that was an important lesson that I learned. No one else has taught me that, but her. So it complemented what I've come to understand about the nature of voodoo, of candomblé, of obia, of all of these traditions that, in fact, that have been held on to throughout the Americas, but I would say most powerfully in the Caribbean and South America. And it's been women, Latinas, for the most part, who have been upholding these traditions. So I guess so in that way, in my confession, that's where I sort of rest in terms of embracing that element of myself.